The Haitian Revolution didn't emerge suddenly in 1791. Rather, it emerged from decades of rising tensions, conflicts, and global change that came within the French colony of Saint-Domingue. Before the first shots of revolution fired, the island had already become one of the most profitable colonies in the world by producing sugar, coffee, and plantations. All this production was based on the forced labor of almost 500,000 enslaved Africans. This demographic imbalance created a highly volatile social order which can only be sustained through violence. This colonial society was built on three major groups whose interests suddenly conflicted with each other. The ones demanded higher authority, poorer whites who disliked both the wealthy elites and the free people of color, or mixed-race landowners who were successful but still denied political rights because of their race. Meanwhile, African enslaved people protected their memories on African political social structure, tradition, and fight strategies. With this emotional connection to their past, they maintained hidden communication that later became an important part of the revolt. These internal tensions are increased by emergence of Enlightenment ideas about natural rights, liberty, and equality that affected the entire world. The news about American Revolution was an inspirer for many to imagine political independence, while the French Revolution directly demolished the colonial structure. These movements in France caused debates on rights of men, encouraged people of different color to seek citizenship. Moreover, these radical political environment in France harmed the stability of French colonies. When the National Assembly of France gives some limited rights to different colors of people, white colonies severely resisted. This created a political crisis that points out the fragility of white domination. Furthermore, brutal working conditions, high rates of death, and constant transportation of African slaves to the external countries kept the resistance alive between enslaved people. Maroon communities in the mountains was the place for training for the rebellion, while the religious voodoo ceremonies provided spiritual and emotional unition. Right before the revolution, the colony was ready to explode. Economic succession caused social divisions, political conflict on profit, and enslaved people were hiddenly working to destroy the colonial control. Thus, the core of Haitian revolution lay not only local domination, but also in global ideology change and the other experiences of rebellion and revolution. The rebellion of August 1791 didn't appear suddenly. It came from years of anger, new revolutionary ideas, and hidden work of enslaved people. This started almost at the beginning. All these factors turned Saint-Domingue from one of the richest colonies in the world to the birthplace of first successful slave rebellion and revolution in the human history.
The Haitian Revolution started in August 1791, right there at Bois Cayman. Enslaved people came together and made a big choice that changed the whole Atlantic world completely. They simply said no to keep living with slavery as their fate. Soon after that gathering, things exploded in the northern province. Fires went through plantations, sugar mills fell down, and the richest spot in the French Empire had to deal with an uprising that no one had ever seen before. The news spread quickly between the plantations, and the revolt kept growing. It turned into the biggest, most organized slave rebellion ever written down. That whole thing comes straight out of Enlightenment talk about freedom and being equal. Saint-Domingue's plantation setup brought huge money to Europe, but it meant total horror for the people held in chains. When they stood up, those rebels fought their owners and the whole bad system of the Atlantic slave trade too. They said clearly the French Revolution's big ideas like freedom, equality, and brotherhood were for everyone, everywhere. Their fight made France face the huge gap between what it said and what it did in its colonies. Things moved fast after that. In 1793, French officials in Saint-Domingue went ahead and ended slavery there. A year later, that freedom spread across the whole French Empire. Folks who had been enslaved suddenly counted as full citizens. No other time in the age of revolution saw anything like that change. All this came Toussaint Louverture, this smart thinker who pulled together people who used to be enslaved. He beat back armies from other colonies and got the place steady again. Toussaint fought Spain in battles, pushed back British attacks, and worked his way through tricky French politics. In the end, he hit hard at Europe, control and slave trade across the ocean. With him in charge, the revolution grew into something political that could really go after empires themselves. Still, trouble hits in 1802 when Napoleon Bonaparte tried to bring back slavery. He sent one of the biggest armies ever to the Americas for it. The fighting that broke out wrecked anything, with burned out lands and way too many deaths. But the people in Saint-Domingue would not go back to being owned. After they caught Toussaint, the job of leading fell to Jean-Jacques Dessalines. He stayed tough and focused, bringing everyone together in the fight. In the end, he beat the French completely. On January 1, 1804, Dessalines said that Haiti stood independent. It became the first republic led by black people anywhere, and the only country born straight from the slave revolt that won. That whole event broke apart what Europeans thought they knew about race, empires, and whether people from colonies could actually run their own show. Even now, its effects keep moving through the world we live in.
The end of the Haitian Revolution in 1804 didn't just mark the close of the 13-year struggle. It marked the beginning of something much larger, a transformation of the entire Atlantic world. Haiti became the first independent black republic in history, and that alone shocked every major slave-holding society of the time. The revolution proved something powerful. Enslaved people were not passive victims. They were political actors who defeated European armies, destroyed one of the wealthiest colonial systems in existence, and claimed Enlightenment ideals, liberty, equality, and universal rights. Ideals that white Europeans had long denied them. But freedom came with enormous challenges. After more than a decade of war, Haiti was in ruins. Plantations were destroyed, roads and irrigation systems had collapsed, and entire towns had disappeared. Many people had died or been displaced, and those who survived often struggled with hunger and disease. So when Haiti stepped into independence, it faced a massive task. Rebuilding a society whose economy was almost completely shattered, early leaders worked to stabilize agriculture, establish order, and create new political institutions. At the same time, they lived under the constant fear that former colonial powers might return and try to restore slavery. And that fear was completely justified. The major empires of the world, especially the United States, Spain, and Britain, refused to accept Haiti. To them, a black republic was dangerous. They worried that Haiti's example would inspire enslaved people in their own territories to rise up, so Haiti was isolated. Foreign ships avoided its ports, and the country was shut out of the global trade for years. The harshest blow came in 1825 when France demanded a massive compensation payment in exchange for recognizing Haiti as a nation. The payment was supposedly for the loss of property, which meant the people who had freed themselves. To pay this debt, Haiti took out of loans at the extremely high interest rates, and these payments drained the country's economy for more than a century. Money that should have gone to schools, roads, and development went straight to the French banks instead. Despite these challenges, the Haitian Revolution had a global impact. It accelerated the decline of the Atlantic slave trade, it inspired independence movements across Latin America, and it exposed a deep contradiction in places like the United States and France, countries that spoke of liberty and human rights while still maintaining slavery. Haiti showed the world that racial equality wasn't just an idea, it became a political reality achieved by people who had once been enslaved. In the long term, the Haitian Revolution stands as one of the strongest examples of the collective resistance in world history. Its legacy continues to challenge old ideas about race, empire, and what freedom truly means. And even today, Haiti remains a powerful symbol of how marginalized people can reshape the world by claiming their own future.